What I'll do is take about, I believe this program is about 45 minutes long. So I'll take about 40 minutes to present. And then I'll leave about 5, maybe even 10 minutes for any questions. So I noticed that some of you do have access to unmute yourselves. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions as we go along. That's perfectly fine. Or if you'd like to just put your questions in the chat box, that's fine as well. And we can go over those at the end. So for the next 40 minutes, like I said, what we're going to do is talk about, see if I can multitask here and admit people at the same time. Basically talk about how to manage menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, prevent or delay cancer. And we're going to go over lifestyle changes that we can make to basically help with bone health. Again, delay osteoporosis or osteopenia. So let's get started. Okay. Whoops. All right. So what I'd like to do first is go over 2 of the many changes that we go through in life. And one of them is called senescence. And senescence is basically a gradual deterioration of function or characteristic of most complex life forms. This is going to be very tricky for me, trying to admit people at the same time as having a conversation, and I apologize. Uh-oh. Did we just lose the screen?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Michelle, if you'd like, I would volunteer to be a co-host. If you want to co-host me, I could admit people. So,
oh, that would be awesome. I'm not used to doing this. Okay, so who is speaking right now that would like to co-host?
Colleen Walsh.
All right, Colleen, I see you. I don't see co-host, so if I put change as host, will that work?
Yep, looks like I'm host now.
Okay.
But that may take you from being able to share screen though, so let's see if you can still share your screen.
Let's see. Host disable participant screen. Bear with me, guys. All right. Let me go back, see if I can make you co-host. I'm glad that's not my dog.
Hi, this is Kirsten. Actually, I think if you go down, if you're host, if you go down to the bottom, there should be a security icon.
Yeah, I lost that when I made Colleen the host.
Oh, well, then Colleen could go in, and there's actually a thing to uncheck so that people don't have to be admitted in. They can just come in on their own.
Oh, that would be great. Colleen,
Okay.
can you do
Let
that?
me see. It says allow participants to block meeting, enable waiting room. So I'm unenabling it. I've disabled the waiting room. So I think that might mean everyone just gets in.
Okay. All right.
And now I'll make you a host again. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about this, guys.
No, that's okay.
I'm not used to managing the screen and presenting at the same time. All right. So you're going to make me the host. Perfect. All right. All right. Here we go. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, let me just minimize this. All right, so like I was saying, we go through 2 changes. I mean, these aren't the only changes that we go through as we mature, but senescence is one of them. It's a gradual deterioration of function and characteristic of most complex life forms. And believe it or not, that actually peaks at the age of 20. Now, a lot of us don't feel those changes. We pretty much don't experience them or notice them until we're in our late 30s or early 40s. A lot of times I'll get patients that will say, you know, I'm losing flexibility or I'm losing my balance. And again, so that's part of the senescence process. And then the other thing that we go through is the development of what we call sarcopenia. So we're losing muscle as we mature. And basically at the age of 30, it starts. We lose about 3% lean body mass, muscle, and we lose 3% every year. So think about, I have patients who will say, oh, when they're in their 40s, oh, I can't seem to eat the way I used to be able to eat. I seem to be gaining weight quickly. And so that's part of the sarcopenia because we're losing muscle. And what happens, what exacerbates it basically is if we're physically inactive, plus our hormone levels are decreasing. So as we're going through perimenopause, menopause, and then postmenopausal, our estrogen levels are starting to decrease. Protein synthesis is decreasing, which is key for repairing and restoring muscle. And then our motor unit is basically remodeling. So again, as we mature, we're not absorbing nutrients as efficiently as we used to. So it's harder for us to create muscle. We're not as flexible. And again, our balance is off. And we notice this more pretty much around the age of 50, 65. But again, some of us will notice it around 40 when we're having a difficult time keeping our weight down and we notice that we're gaining weight. So I just wanted you to understand the process of maturing and really, do we have any control over this? This is something that we don't have control over completely, but we can delay it or slow the process. So what I want to do is get into, okay, so now oh, there we go. Now you gotta bear with me, I'm moving the slides. So our agenda here is to stay strong and healthy as we mature. So I wanted to call this the synergy of 6. So I want you to keep in mind that it's not just one thing. It's not just nutrition. It's not just exercise, that it's a synergy of sleep hygiene, managing your stress, managing your nutrition, your lifestyle, staying social, and then also looking at your environment. So we're going to look at each one of these. What I would encourage you to do if you have a piece of paper and a pencil is take note of what areas you think that you need to work on. Because what I want you to keep in mind is that.
No, I said I would send you the signature. I just haven't had a chance to. I just got off the phone with the client.
I just wanted you to keep in mind
No, I said
that.
I would send it to you.
I'm sorry, somebody needs to mute there because we can hear you having a conversation.
Okay.
But
Well, I was going to send you the signature for you to put it on. Do you want me to put it on and send it
So
back
we'll
to you?
go through each one of these. And what I'd like you to do is ask yourself, have you perfected this? For instance,
All right,
sleep
you'll have it in a
hygiene. Are you
minute.
getting plenty of sleep? Boom, you don't need to work on that. But let's
Okay,
say maybe
thank
you
you.
needed to work on
If you,
stress
by the way,
management.
if you look down in the
Remember, these
email
are
thing,
lifestyle changes that we do have.
what you have to is
control
Michelle
over.
already put
They
it
are
in there. Like if you
choice.
scroll down, you'll already see
Hold
it.
on.
It's at the
Susan, we
bottom.
can hear you.
Also, if you want to go back to that security tab, you can
Yes.
mute everybody. You can control that yourself, Michelle.
Okay, let me do that. So. It says lock, enable waiting room, hide profile, share screen, chat, rename, suspend participant activities. I'm afraid to touch anything, but I think that they shut it off. So, all right, let me go back to this. Okay, so we're going to touch upon each one of these. And like I said, their lifestyle changes. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not something you can perfect. It takes about 6 months to a year to work towards making them a habit. All right, so what we're going to do is start with sleep hygiene. So sleep is basically key to overall health, good health. So a lot of times I'll get patients that will say that they're not sleeping well, they're having a difficult time losing weight. And if we don't manage this, it's very difficult for us to manage eating right or staying active and so forth and so on. So I highly recommend asking yourself, do you get 7.5 hours of sleep a night? Research shows that we need at least 7.5 to 8 hours of consecutive sleep. We can be sleep deprived and we cannot make up for that, just to keep in mind. We want to focus on sleeping in a dark room. And we want to make sure that the room is quiet. Perfect example, we just moved, we sold our house and we're in an apartment and we're right on the highway and it's super noisy. So sometimes you may not be able to control the noise, but there are things that you can do to cover up the noise. So if you've ever heard of white noise or pink noise, so white noise is basically like a humming sound, or it sounds like a fan. And then pink noise is nature sounds. So some people find that that's really helpful as far as sleeping goes. You also want to make sure that your room temperature is cool and not hot. It's very difficult for people to get a restful night's sleep in a very hot room. And then shut down technology at least 3 hours prior to sleeping. So some people will get into bed and they'll be on their cell phone or their iPad. And it's important to understand that that blue light actually still stimulates the brain after you've shut it off. And it will make it harder for you to actually get a well night's rest. So what I encourage you to do is, ask yourself, do you participate in good sleep hygiene? If you're finding on the bottom here, it says, do you snore? So if you're finding that you snore, that you wake up tired, that you find that you can't seem to get enough energy during the day and you're depending on food or coffee for fuel, or you're having a difficult time losing weight, I highly recommend reaching out to a sleep specialist and maybe getting a sleep study done, because sleep is number one. It's super important. And there's so many people that don't realize how important it is, or don't think that it's important, or they'll make excuses and say, I don't need a lot of sleep. The other thing to keep in mind too, so as we mature, we have a hormone, it's a steroid hormone called cortisol. And we tend to produce more of that in the morning. And cortisol, what it does is it actually causes the body to produce glucose. So when people are saying to me that they're not able to lose weight or they're having a hard time, what happens, and it's because they're not sleeping well, what happens is the cortisol levels are elevated, the body makes glucose. Now, glucose we need for energy, right? But let's say we're not using that glucose for energy, and our first meal of the day is carbohydrate loaded. And let's say we're struggling with being overweight. What can happen is we can become insulin resistant. And so when the body makes cortisol when we first wake up and it's producing glucose, and then we eat a breakfast that's carbohydrate laden, which is fine. I'm not saying carbohydrates are bad, but what will happen to that particular individual is that glucose will get converted as fat unless they use it for energy via exercise. So I just want you to understand, cortisol can be one of our biggest enemies, and it's very hard to manage it, especially if you're not getting enough sleep. So it's super important that you get adequate sleep so that it's not quite as elevated when you first wake up. Okay, so besides getting adequate sleep, also making sure that you're managing your stress. Now, occasional stress is fine. Some of us thrive off of it. Some of us are productive at work when we're under stress. Some of us like to work under pressure, or we tend to procrastinate, and we find that we thrive. But ongoing stress can actually be an issue. And again, that will increase your cortisol levels. So the key to stress is paying attention to, how do you perceive things? Think about things that happen at work, and are you perceiving them in a negative way? Let's say, for a lack of a better example, let's say you're driving to Boston and somebody speeds up past you and then cuts you off. And so some people would react in a negative way, and it may create a little road rage, and you may try to speed up to them and pass them. So what you want to ask yourself, are you the kind of person that would react to that type of behavior from another individual, or would you just let it go? So if you're finding that there's a lot of negative reactions towards things, it's super helpful to back up a little bit and see if you can reframe your thoughts into more of a positive. So stress management isn't just about perception, but also, what are you doing to relax? What are you doing for yourself? Is there any me time? Okay, because again, when you participate in activities that are relaxing or positive, you can keep those cortisol levels down. Laughter has been shown to be very beneficial. It actually stimulates your serotonin levels. Those are your happy hormones. It actually stimulates your epinephrine and norepinephrine. So laughter is key. You know, ask yourself, when's the last time you had a good laugh? And then two, I always encourage people, try to engage in watching, like if you come home at night and you're watching a show, are you watching something that could be a little bit stressful, like for lack of a better example, Criminal Minds, or are you watching something that's funny and joyful? So practice that and notice how the way you perceive things may change. Positivity is key. There's a great read out there by Barbara Fredrickson, and there's a lot of research that trying to reframe your thoughts into a positive will make a much more productive person. Again, you know, leading by example, trying to reframe thoughts into a positive versus a negative can help you manage your stress and actually be less vulnerable to stressful situations. The other things to participate in as far as stress management goes is meditation or yoga, Tai Chi, Reiki, and then seeking therapy or support is super important. So for instance, a lot of companies, and I'm sure Tufts is one, we have something called an employee assistance program. Certainly reach out to them if you're finding that you're really having a difficult time at work or it's stressful, or reach out to a life coach. Not everybody is receptive to seeing a therapist, but a life coach is just as helpful. So again, the purpose of managing stress is to keep those cortisol levels down. Keep in mind too, people who engage in stressful situations or are experiencing ongoing stress can actually, we have, let me just back up a little bit. We have free radicals in our body. So they're like oncogenes. And what can happen is if you're going through ongoing stress, those unstable free radicals can actually mutate and cause cancer. So there's a lot of research out there that it's super important to manage your stress, especially if it's ongoing. And again, you know, there's all kinds of, as a matter of fact, there's all kinds of questionnaires out there, you know, am I stressed, that you could take online. I think the positivity book that I was mentioning by Barbara Fredrickson, she actually has a positivity ratio questionnaire available online, and that's free, and you can see what style of thinking you have. But this is something besides sleep that is super important to manage and get a handle on, because it can not only increase cortisol levels or basically turn on those unstable free radicals, but it can also affect your hormones too. Those of us, I'm done with menopause, but I remember during that, I think I started perimenopause at 40, and I've noticed that stress actually exacerbated the tension. So I found that managing stress, even just deep breathing or visualization techniques, really helped me to manage the tension that I experienced. Because those of you who are going through it now probably know what I'm talking about. So nourishment is key as well. And if you've ever heard of the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet, the DASH diet stands for the dietary approach to stop hypertension. So nourishment plays an important role again at preventing cancer, managing our hormones, keeping those cortisol levels at bay. It also makes you less vulnerable to stressful situations, especially if you're nourishing your body properly. So when you eat, and this is where I would love for you to take note as well, if you have a piece of paper in front of you, what we'll do is have you draw a great big circle. And on half of that plate, like what I'd like you to do is take that circle and divide that plate in half. And on half of that plate, I'd like you to write down fruits and vegetables. I'm very much a visual person. I don't know if you are, but I highly encourage using this foundation as your model on how to prepare or plan breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So when you're prepping or planning breakfast, lunch, and dinner, try to focus on filling half your plate with fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are antioxidants, anti-inflammatory. They actually act as natural neurotransmitters and they stimulate happy hormones. So, ask yourself, are you eating 2 cups of fruit a day? And are you having 4 cups of raw vegetables a day? So a cup of raw vegetable cooks down to about a half a cup cooked. So really, we want to aim for about 5 to 9 servings. In the Mediterranean diet, they're consuming 9 to 13 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. All right. And I don't know if you've ever heard of hyaluronic acid. That's something that's promoted a lot in skincare creams. But guess what? These plants, the fruits and vegetables, actually have natural hyaluronic acid. So they're great for the skin too. So again, going back to what I mentioned earlier about taking note, that might be one simple thing you might want to say to yourself is, let me just really increase my intake of fruits and vegetables. So half your plate's fruits and vegetables. Then the other quarter of your plate, you want to focus on whole grains. And whole grains are a great source of fiber, so they're going to lower your cholesterol level. They'll make you feel full. In a whole grain, how to identify a whole grain is usually on the package. There's a little wheat symbol and it will tell you how many grams of whole grains are in it. So for example, a half a cup of cooked oats will give you over 40 grams of whole grains. And the US dietary guidelines recommends at least 48. So really, we only need to consume about 3 whole grain servings a day. So if you think about breakfast, you had a half a cup of oats with your fruit. And then if at lunch, you had some whole grain bread or whole grain pasta with vegetables. And then if at dinner, you had, again, a whole grain bread or pasta. Things like quinoa are considered a whole grain. Farro, spelt. And so they've also been shown to decrease your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's, incorporating the whole grains. So if you see here, the first 3 food groups are plant-based. And I don't know if you ever heard of the plant-based diet or forks over knives. But I highly recommend and I highly encourage you to look into it. There's a great site. It's called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.org. It's pcrm.org. And they promote more of a whole food plant-based. It's not vegan. It's more of consuming whole foods and less processed foods. So legumes, nuts, and seeds are, again, very important. Now in the Mediterranean diet or the Dashan diet, it's recommended to consume at least 3 servings of grains, nuts, and seeds a week. So legumes are a high source of protein. They do have some calcium and iron, and the nuts and seeds are great for heart health. Some of them have vitamin E, and they're good for your skin. The nuts and seeds, basically, you want to aim for about 2 tablespoons a day or 2 tablespoons a week. So those would be part of your protein. So that plate, if you did draw the circle and half of it's fruits and vegetables, 1/4 is whole grains, the other quarter of your plate is going to consist of your lean protein or your plant-based proteins. Okay. One thing I would like to touch upon in regards to legumes, because one thing that our goal here is to delay or prevent cancer and also to manage menopause. So some people will say to me, oh, I can't eat soy. I had cancer. My doctor told me to avoid soy. Well, the soy that your physician is referring to, or actually what the physician is referring to is the cancer that you may have had is estrogen thriving, but it's the estrogen that your body produces, not the phytoestrogen that comes from soy. So there's a lot of research out there that indicates that soy does not cause cancer. It's a phytoestrogen. It can help you with managing menopause. For instance, I know when I was going through perimenopause, I would just have a cup of soy milk every day, and I noticed that it helped manage my hot flashes. There isn't any evidence. There's nothing evidence-based, but me personally, I found that it was most beneficial. So I don't want you to think that eating soy is going to cause cancer. There is no research out there that says that it does. Those who have had cancer that's estrogen thriving, it was thriving off the estrogen that your body is producing. And remember, as we mature after menopause, postmenopausal, we're no longer producing estrogen. And some people who have had cancer in the past may choose not to take estrogen supplements because of the risk of cancer. All right, and then we move into some of the animal products. So as far as nourishment goes, you want to choose low-fat dairy products, things that are lower in saturated fat, so skim milk, or you could choose plant-based dairy products. A lot of the plant-based milks, such as soy or almond or oat, have added B12 and calcium and vitamin D. So those are just a good alternative. And then your lean protein choices. Now with the Mediterranean and the DASH diet, they encourage more fish, fish that's high in omega-3 fatty acids, such as salmon, tuna, bass, or mackerel. So they're good for brain health and they're good for heart health. The other thing, as we mature, you really want to be mindful of your sodium intake, because you're going to find as you mature, our kidneys aren't working as efficiently as they used to. So if we eat a high sodium diet, basically over 2,000 milligrams a day, or let's say if a meal consisted of over 600 milligrams per meal 3 times a day, you're going to find that you'll retain water a lot easier. High sodium and high protein diets can actually interfere with bone health. So you have to keep in mind that the sodium can actually make your bones deteriorate and become more porous. So you really want to be careful about not adding extra salt to your diet and not eating too high of a protein. I get a lot of patients who will think that they need to eat over 8 ounces of meat a day or use protein supplements for muscle repair, and that can actually be harmful for your bone health. And then the last part of staying nourished is the water. It's very important to aim for about 6 to 8 ounce glasses of water a day. Over 70% of our body is made from water, and water actually it's H2O, so there's oxygen, so it oxygenates your cells. So sometimes if you notice in the afternoon that you're getting tired or sluggish, it may not mean that you need food. It might just mean that you need oxygen. So hydrate or go out and take a little bit of a walk. So this is basically the goal when it comes to nutrition and what you want to focus on. And the protein, maybe 5 to 6 ounces of animal protein a day, that's sufficient. And then dairy, you can get enough calcium. If you consume 3 dairy products a day, that's good for bone health. Or again, in your legumes, like I had mentioned, or your green leafy vegetables also contain calcium. Okay. So another important part of lifestyle is staying active. So remember what we talked about, how our body starts to deteriorate at the peak age of 20. And then around 30, we start to lose muscle. So people will say, oh, what can I eat to increase my metabolism? Well, guess what? It's not what you eat, it's your lifestyle, it's your activity level. And it gets harder as we mature. So what you want to focus on is trying to aim for at least 30 minutes, 5 days a week of some kind of physical activity. So resistance after 40 is really important. Resistance exercise at least twice a week for about 20 minutes. The weight-bearing exercises are great for bone health. The other thing you're going to notice too, when you're active, if you are already active, you probably are noticing that you can manage stress better. And you're probably noticing that if you're going through perimenopause, premenopause, that you're able to manage the tension and the fluctuation in hormones much better because you're participating in an active lifestyle. So like I said, resistance twice a week for 20 to 30 minutes. Balance is super important. Focus on doing something daily that will help with balance, be it yoga or Tai Chi. So remember when we talked about senescence, that's one thing you start to notice after the age of 30 is that you're not able to stand on one leg and put your shoe on or pull your pants on. So that might be something to pay attention to. Are you able to stand on one foot and pull your pants up or put your shoes on? Are you losing your balance? And maybe participate in things that will help improve your balance. Aerobic exercise is important for heart health. Again, it helps manage your cortisol levels. All of these actually help manage your cortisol levels. And remember, cortisol we want to keep at a bare minimum. And research has actually shown that those who are active daily actually produce less cortisol in the morning. Okay, so aerobic exercise, at least 30 minutes daily. And you know what? Here's the scoop. Do something you enjoy. It's not like you need to go out running, because believe it or not, if you're doing something that you don't enjoy and it's stressful, that will actually, believe it or not, cause your cortisol levels to go up. So make sure you do. So if it's not a walk, hiking is considered aerobic. Do something, riding a bike is considered aerobic. So again, don't do something that you feel like you're not enjoying. And then daily stretching is also very important. I tell all my patients, after 40, try to engage in stretching either every morning when you first get out of bed or in the evening before you go to bed. You'll find that it will really help you sleep better or will help you have a more productive day. It only takes 5 minutes to do some type of stretching. All right, so we've talked about nutrition, we've talked about stress management, we've talked about physical activity, and a lot of that is important for bone health and delaying or preventing cancer. So the risk factors for osteoporosis, here's the scoop. All right, so when we're in our teenage years, that's the best time to build strong bones. So those of you who have kids, I highly encourage you to emphasize that with them, that teenage years is an important
years. That's the best time.
I don't know why I'm echoing. So teenage years, and then when you're nursing or pregnant is a good time to develop strong bones, and then in your 30s. And then after that, if you haven't worked on that healthy foundation, it's a little too late. So now after 30, I don't know why I'm echoing. Can you guys hear that echo?
Because someone is unmuted and you're getting feedback.
Oh, all right. And I don't know how to change that. Okay. So after, like I said, after 30, if we have not created a good foundation of bones, the goal now is just to delay delay making more of a porous bone. So like I said, just be mindful of taking an adequate calcium. Usually our OB will recommend a calcium supplement. The goal is about 500 milligrams 3 times a day. You never want to take more than 500 milligrams in one setting because you won't absorb all of it. So some of your doctors may recommend a calcium supplement and then a vitamin D. Now, I'm originally from Rhode Island, and down there, vitamin D was a routine lab. Up here, it's not. So if you haven't had your vitamin D level checked, definitely get it checked, because again, that's important for bone health. It helps you absorb the calcium. And again, it delays the developing of porous bones. And I would never tell someone to take a calcium supplement unless they know what their vitamin D level is. So always get that checked. And the goal is to have the vitamin D greater than 30 milligrams per deciliter. Or you could take a supplement. If you do get your vitamin D level checked and it's below 20, the recommendation according to the American Medical Association is basically 50,000 international units, and you would take that for 6 to 8 weeks and get your levels checked. So definitely bone up on calcium, vitamin D. Make sure you're taking in plenty of fruits and vegetables because they're loaded with phosphorus, and magnesium, which is important for bone health. Make sure you're not taking in too much protein or sodium or caffeine. You can have a cup of coffee a day, but a lot of us don't do that. Caffeine actually prevents the absorption of calcium. And then, like I said, too much sodium can actually create a porous bone. Try not to drink alcohol in excess. So for women, the goal is about 1 drink a night. Try not to save those for Friday and bank them all up. It's basically 1 a night, because alcohol can create a porous bone. Try to abstain from smoking. Try to live an active lifestyle, because like we said, weight-bearing exercises will create a dense bone and delay osteoporosis. And then, be careful about your weight. Try not to be too thin, and try to make sure that, for instance, I work with eating disorders in my private practice, and I get a lot of women who are struggling with amenorrhea, and they're at really high risk of developing osteoporosis and osteopenia because they're not absorbing the calcium and vitamin D, and they're not having their periods. And then, as you know, post-menopausal, we aren't producing estrogen anymore, and we won't be creating healthy bones. So that's where sometimes your physician may recommend an estrogen supplement if you felt like you needed it. All right. The other part of the synergy of 6 is staying social. So surround yourself with positive people. I know there can be a lot of negative people out there, but if you find that that's really bringing yourself down, try to engage in relationships that are positive, that incorporate laughter into your day. Try to incorporate volunteering in your day. Maybe being spiritual, attending church or some kind of a group, or developing a hobby or travel. So these research has shown that the person who's more social actually helps delay or prevent dementia and Alzheimer's. It stimulates your oxytocin levels. It stimulates your serotonin levels. And it actually reduces your risk of depression. The other thing, the last thing of the 6 is environmental. So what's in our environment, we can't always control. There's a great book out there. I have it posted here. It's by Lorenzo Cohen, and it's called The Anti-Cancer Living. And he calls it the mix of 6. So I changed it up a little bit and called it the synergy of 6. And he talks about all of these. So it's not about just cancer, but keep in mind that these 6 things that we've touched upon can actually help us manage our menopause and delay cancer or prevent cancer and create good bone health. So things that are in our environment that we may not have control over, but I would encourage you to be mindful of, are things like aflatoxins. So aflatoxins are a fungus that's found on corn or nuts, and if they're exposed to moisture. And again, we wouldn't know if our nuts or corn would be exposed to moisture. So just be mindful of that. Household pesticides. It's amazing how many people, or let's say our spouses, will be outside and they're using some kind of a pest control or some kind of a weed control without wearing goggles or a mask or gloves. So if you're using any type of chemical, I highly encourage, make sure that you're wearing goggles or a mask or gloves so that you don't inhale or get exposed to those chemicals. Ultraviolet radiation, the sunlight, again, can be very toxic. So you should be wearing sunscreen, and then be mindful about what's in your water. So I know when we moved here, we had a well and there was radon in it and arsenic and lead. So if you have a well, make sure you're testing it frequently and aware of what's in your well, and that it's, if you needed to get a filtration system, then that's super important because you don't want to take in those chemicals. Air quality, you've probably heard of greenhouse gas emissions and the ozone layer and what's contributing to it. That's something we do not have control over, but we could certainly help by minimizing that, by riding our bikes or reducing our meat consumption. Be mindful of heavy metals. And then there's one last thing. There's a lot, and you'll read more. I think the site is Cancer and the Environment. That's a great site if you wanted to know more about chemicals and what's in our environment, and just to be mindful of. The other thing to keep in mind is grilling. When you're grilling your food, especially meat, at a high temperature, and it comes back to your plate scorched, that's the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which can be carcinogenic. So pay attention, to how you're preparing your meat on the grill. Okay, so it looks like we have a couple minutes left. So thank you all for attending. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, this was a fantastic group. I'm so glad you were all here. Let's see, can we get copies of these slides? Sure, so I can certainly send the slides to Andrea and she'll send them to Tufts. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, can you repeat what you're saying about cortisol when you wake up and eat? Okay, perfect. So not everybody does this happen to. It predominantly happens to people who are struggling with what we call insulin resistance. So insulin resistance can be found in individuals. So for instance, if a man has a waist circumference over 40 inches or a woman has a waist circumference over 35. So what can happen is that individual, if they're not sleeping well, and then they wake up with elevated cortisol levels, their cortisol levels produce glucose. Okay, so there's glucose in the blood. And then if we have, let's say we had orange juice and Cheerios and skim milk, so it's a carbohydrate breakfast. So the body, what will happen is it will say, oh, this is too much glucose. You already have glucose in there from the cortisol. You're eating this high carb breakfast. There's too much fat around the midsection of my belly. I can't use that for energy, so I'm going to store it as fat. So that's pretty much what happens. So if someone is at a healthy weight, they're probably less likely, but let me tell you a secret. You're going to notice as you mature that belly fat adds up really quickly. And a lot of it is because of stress, or again, because of not sleeping well. That's why it's important to manage the stress as we mature, because you're going to notice that the body isn't as sensitive to the insulin as it used to be. So even those who are at a healthy weight might find that all of a sudden that weight around the belly is starting to accumulate. What activity helps with stiffness? So perfect. So great question. So I usually suggest, like, you can go online and look up morning stretches or stretches you can do in bed, but think about some of those stretching exercises if you participate in yoga. So bringing your knees to your chest, like you're lying on your back in bed. So you're squeezing your knees to your chest. I don't know if you've ever heard of the happy baby pose, but that's where you're laying on your back and you're bringing your knees to your underarms and grabbing your toes. That's great for your hips and your hamstrings. Or raising your legs to the ceiling is another great stretch, or cat-cow. So again, I bet you could Google American College of Sports Medicine will have some great exercises for stiffness, but I can guarantee you, if you practice that every morning or before you go to bed, you're going to wake up a heck of a lot less stiff. Or participate in yoga as well. Sleeping well, how if you wake up with night sweats due to menopause? That's a great question. So I remember experiencing that myself. And again, everybody's different. And I don't know if there's soy in your diet. That's the only thing I could suggest, or talk to your primary care. And again, menopause, I remember research showing, ask your mother what she went through, because you'll probably go through the same thing that she went through. But you could experiment with soy, just adding a serving of soy to your diet daily and see if that helps. The things that make it worse is inactivity. So physical activity could help manage the night sweats. The other thing that makes it worse is alcohol. So try to keep that at bay, because if you've ever noticed, maybe Friday night you're out and then you have a couple drinks and then you're just drenched in sweat that night. Great questions. Thank you all for attending. This was a fantastic group. And I will get the slides to everybody. Sorry for the glitch in the beginning. All right. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.